Perfect. Okay. Hello, my friends. Welcome to this new section of our Symposium 2021, Learn from the World. This is the mindset and mental health section of this symposium. I am happy and honored to welcome you in my presentation, Healing Trauma as Way to Attain Authentic Self. My name is Jorge Carrillo. I am a Holigral Method facilitator and technical coordinator. The work I do is, it ranges from clinical psychology, addressing mental issues, general human development, family issues, education, and any other kind of activity the human endeavors, performance. I also consult organizationally, and my expertise is based on 10 years in working with this particular focus. The presentation I was planning to address today, it touches several different areas of experience. So I hope that this will give you broad understanding on how is it that our reality is created and why it is so important to understand trauma and how is it related to our own particular self. So some of these ideas will touch in the realms of philosophy, some in the realms of spirituality, religion, and some of them in the realm of physics. So I hope you enjoy it, and if you find it challenging, there will be an exercise at the end. I hope you will give me the time to deliver this simple exercise as way to understand how it is that this work is done. And eventually we'll have a Q and answer so we can discuss what is going to be presented here. As a context to my presentation, I'd like to share the information from which this particular set of knowledge is rooted. This is the work of a scientist who had invested 30 years in research and development in intelligent systems and radars. The psychology he developed came from the understanding that we operate in a similar way. So he began exploring how it is that mathematics, physics, and other soft sciences can allow us to understand the human experience. So the work I'm going to present is based on the mathematics of complex numbers, meaning that there is a complex reality, a real tangible one that we can experience in our bodies, and also an imaginary one. From that realization, the mathematics of complex numbers allows to give the understandings to what is going to be presented. We also base our knowledge in fractal geometry, as it has been observed that this is the most efficient and consistent way of organization in dynamic systems. Fractals are perceivable in every experience in our lives, and I will show you in a moment as a way to understand that we are built upon patterns intelligence. The chaos theory allows us to understand that every experience in human endeavor is related to a pair of strange attractors. This allows us to understand the observer phenomena in relation to any subject of our focus. The system theory is the body of knowledge that allows us to understand that we are interconnected and there are dynamics playing out that we do not observe, but nevertheless is the common denominator of these dynamic systems. Measurement and uncertainty as the main principles and set of understandings of quantum physics. The observer phenomena is understood under these tenets of science. We use an engineering life cycle because everything operates within time and it develops in its stages throughout its existence. That means it is valid for a live person, for an interaction like a relationship, for a project, or the whole experience of human nature. There is based in anthropology and universal myths as a way to understand our cultural background and lineage throughout the ages. And we also base the work and go beyond the innovations of Freud with psychoanalysis, with Jung as well with psychoanalysis and the archetypes mostly, Eric Berne, the transactional analysis psychology, Erik Erikson, which offers the development of personality, Bandler and Grinder, the founders of neurolinguistic programming, and David Grove, the creator of emergent knowledge and clean language, which are the intervention tools we are going to experience and which the tools we offer are based upon. John Farrell, in the next session he will present, he will share much of his experience with David Grove and this particular body of knowledge. So we have a common thread here that I hope we can connect and therefore give continuity to the conversation. With this context at hand, then let's explore what is it going on in terms of the authentic self and reality. When I first decided to offer this presentation, my first challenge was how to convey such a complex, diverse body of understanding with you very honorable people from so many parts in the world, with so many belief systems from your own cultural backgrounds, with your language. We are a human tribe. Nevertheless, we are divided because we are fragmented. And this is important because part of what we need to understand is how we came to be with these particular sets of perspectives from our own upbringings. And what I found for this purpose, it's that nature gives us a common thread that we easily can observe in order to understand something that transcends our own thought processes. So let's please give nature this role in leadership in these particular conversations, because at the end, we are all part of a natural system that we are interacting with. So with this at hand, my first question was, how is it that we have to understand authenticity? Authenticity is a term very loosely used in our common discussions, and we know it's about genuinity, but there's something beyond that. So I chose to go to the dictionary and explore a bit more what is it that it means. And the word authentic comes from the Greek word authentikos, meaning original, genuine, principal. And the very same word comes from the root authentes, meaning one acting on one's authority. This is really outstanding because then it begets the question, what kind of authority am I talking about? The Latin word author shows us the way. It speaks about mastery, leadership, or authorship. So then there begets the question, what kind of leadership am I talking about? I can see the word from the leadership perspective as a father, meaning that I lead my family in whatever business we have, as a business leader, project leader, a community leader, but nevertheless, there is a sense of authority that I feel we need to follow, and is the authority of nature, because nature leads the way when it comes to authority. When we see what are the common patterns of organization in nature, then we can have a very cohesive way of guiding our own lives in our endeavors, but most importantly, on how we tackle the daily problems we have, both as an individuals and collective. So let's explore what is it that the principles from theory systems allowed us to understand on how is it that nature operates. Nature, it's a living dynamic system, and because of that, it self-organizes. So it presents a strong dynamical nonlinearity, meaning that life is not a cause and effect phenomena. It's interacting multiplicitly through any possible connections it can allow in order to have this non-dynamic linearity. There is sometimes feedback. Feedback can be positive or negative. Let's explore what feedback is. In the body, as an example, there is a mother about to give birth. Through the pressure of the baby in the bottom of the womb, the body of the woman will begin to create oxytocin, which is a hormone that will create relaxation in the muscles and will allow for the muscles to push the product out of the womb. As that pressure intensifies, the feedback will give a positive signal to the body to keep creating more oxytocin to provoke more dilatation of the muscles to allow the baby to be born. That is an example of positive feedback. Negative feedback, in the other example, would be when our body temperature starts to rise, like if we have fever or a cold. The negative feedback means that will trigger in the body homeostatic processes of self-organization in order to self-regulate the temperature to a normal level to allow for life to keep living. Those are the different kind of examples in the feedback we can experience in life. Socially, there are other examples. Let's explore sorry, the sun is hitting me in the face, so I'll just, it's morning time here. This is better. Okay, so the positive feedback, let's say in the economical world, we have new sources of clean energy. So the feedback we're having is we have to do more of that. We have to create more sources of sustainable energy. Solar panels, electric cars, and all what we know it's coming as a massive trend. So that is a positive feedback, and the society as a whole, economic forces, social changes are striving into that. On the other hand, we have as negative feedback the climate change, the depletion of our resources, temperature is rising, the green masses are being reduced. So we're having a negative feedback, and in response, we're trying to correct the behavior socially in order to change that destination. Nevertheless, whether we attain that goal as a humankind or not, life will go on. It doesn't matter the feedback, life will self-organize regardless of that phenomena. That is an example of non-linearity, strong dynamical systems. In the same matters, the principle of balance and exploration. Life thrives and thrives by exploring the environment, finding resources in order to exploit them in balance. Unfortunately, the humankind cannot operate in that particular way, and we're going to see why. But nature as itself has a balance between exploitation and exploration within its thriving process. There are multiple interactions, meaning that everything is interconnected. We now know amazing information on how the world functions. For example, there is mycelia, which is a kind of fungi, underneath the trees and the plants. That mycelia interconnects underneath, and it builds like an internet for plants. So all the plant systems are interconnected and can sense what is going on in the surroundings, so they can then adapt. It's an amazing expression of how multiple interactions in the living forces allow for life to thrive and understand itself in order to self-adapt as a whole. The interactions we have as a humanity in the opposite direction, they are like bottlenecks, because we have built a collective group that is focusing in monocultural solutions. The hyper-specialization we have developed in our everyday life as society is contributing these multiple interactions. So this monocultural focus of life will deter us for that richness in life in order to apply it to ourselves. The same principle applies then to the availability of energy. Any organizational system will search to efficiently exploit the energy it has with no waste. Humankind wastes a lot. There is no recycling of plastics, of oil derivative products, so that is a loss or free energy that we waste. As we can see, as humankind, we do not behave very consistently with these principles, although they are present everywhere around. And we don't do it because we as a whole have been defined by different moments which dissociate us from this particular phenomena in life, which is also our birthright. So in order to explore this visually and understand how this works, let's see a bit of how the fractalic reality is organized, and this is why we're going to, oh my God. Yeah, there you go. So let's explore the fractal reality so we understand that there are principles valid everywhere, as within so without, so we can see the fractal patterns of organization everywhere in life, even in our bodies. And because we're not different, we behave in fractal dimensions. This particular picture of bubbles, it's the closest, it's the closest illustration I could find that would represent the mind, which is intangible. But nevertheless, mind is consistent with these principles of organization, So mind organizes fractally. From other traditions, we have seen that when we go to meditation and we experience these visions inside, we artistically represent what is observed in these inner realms, just as a way of example. So then this begets the question, how does these universal principles apply to my present expression? The definition of self, the definition of individual, the definition of mind, it's something that it's still missing. The different endeavors of life, like philosophy, religion, psychology, physics, we cannot have a common definition of self. So we can understand self better if we see its attributes, and those attributes are completely related with us. The attributes of an authentic self, in terms of the human experience, expresses itself in our capacity to be resilient and adaptable, to have clarity of mind and intuition, to allow for efficiency rather than politics, which is conflictive and dissociated. We are by nature empathic and collaborative. We can have integral health and live sustainably. And therefore, we have a proper inner compass into the knowing, into the present moment, into the mindfulness, which is not only our birthright, but a state of self. Mindfulness, it's a capacity for us to perceive the world, but it's also a state of self. An authentic self is mindful by definition. Now the question for you, if you could make a brief contemplation in your present situation, how about to see how resilient and adaptable you are in the present moment? Just make a brief contemplation in your life so you can have an assessment. It's just for you to refer. We're not going to share anything. How clear and intuitive you operate in life? Are you efficient enough, or you involved in politics and chit chat when you are collaborating or doing your projects or interacting in social? How empathic and collaborative is your life in the present moment? How integral is your health, body and mind? And how sustainable you live your days? How sustainable is your organization if you are leading one? In that regards, how mindful you are of the whole package of authentic self. This particular contemplation allows us to have a degree of understanding of how much is it that I am the owner of my own reality. And the reason we are exploring this particular set of attributes, and there might be more for sure, it is because the degree in which I am mindful living these particular attributes, it's depending on our traumatized experiences from the very moment we were conceived. So if we are to attain this authentic self, we have to look inwardly and solve any kind of definitory movement which can limit this particular set of attributes. And this is where the challenge comes forth, because at the end we are humans and we have experienced painful experiences all along. We have to understand that there is an inner psychic apparatus, the mind, which is seated in our mind-body system, meaning that the brain and the whole peripheral nervous system allows for that psychic apparatus to operate fully. It is commonly understood that the operations of the brain is divided in left and right hemispheres. This is important to understand because there are aspects of our mind which are built within those particular set of attributes. So the left hemisphere tends to be structured, time-space related, hierarchically organized. It allows for language expression as well as logic and rational thinking. The right hemisphere is constant in the flow. There's no time. That flow has momentum, it has attributes. We allow for creative thinking. It gives us the understanding of space, spatial interaction with the environment, including our body. It allows for intuitive expression of self, and also it manages our emotions. This is very important to understand because we experience a complex reality which is seated in our body, but also in our minds. So we have this by by focalization of systems in which we are body and mind. And it is because the body and mind interacts with the world that we are, since the moment we are conceived, we are outwardly expressing, projecting psychic energy that comes back into the body by the sensations and the external and the internal senses of the body. We are like radars, as I told you, and it is with this apparatus that we go in our everyday business. It doesn't matter where we are. We're constantly in this loop of conscious and unconscious awareness, which is our psychic energy. And this psychic energy, as a way of a model, we can understand it in a process that is called the OODA loop, meaning that my mind-body system will observe, consciously and unconsciously. I can observe my body signals, stress in my back, pain in my gut. I can observe any point of focus that I need to do in order to engage with the environment. And then I will make an orientation process. That orientation process will imply my mental structures, emotional patterns, my sense of boundaries, my understanding of how everything interacts, and then my perceptual individual activity will allow me to make a decision. That decision process, which is mostly regulated by the frontal cortex, will allow me to behave in a certain way. This action will beget an inwardly feedback into my body-mind system, and then I'm constantly operating within this loop. So everything is fine and dandy until there is a moment in where something happens, and then this flow of consciousness, it's interrupted. This is the moment in which a trauma happens. But what is physically, in terms of physics, what happens? When I'm outwardly expressing this psychic energy and something interrupts it, I need to reestablish this cycle, but unfortunately, some of that energy will stay dissociated. And this is very important because in the terms of mathematics and chaotic systems, what will happen is that we will create a chaotic system, which we will explore further. But first, let's understand trauma from a definition. Trauma, because the Greeks had a good influence in our Western culture, it's also coming from the Greek word trauma, and it is considered as a deeply distressing or disturbing experience with long-lasting effects. This definition does not play honor to the experience, so we came with a different one and we use it interchangeably with this work. So we understand that it's an event which will influence our internal, it's an event that will impact our internal collective and create changes due to the personal measurement made of such moment. A new self is created and a younger one is left behind by the interruption of the smooth flow of awareness. This smooth flow of awareness is the cycle I was telling you about. So when that happens, there is a division, a fracture between myselves. A past Jorge or a past you has been created from that experience and it keeps frozen in time, whereas I need to adapt into a present self and create my understanding of the world, which is a measurement. This is very important to understand because whenever this happens, a frozen aspect of myself will be left behind, but it will interact with many other aspects of selves created in other definitory moments. Although we cannot appreciate ourselves divided from outwardly perception, internally, as you saw the picture of the bubble, we are fragmented. And all those fragmentations, we consider them cosmologies. Those are like our mind boxes from which we understand the world. Those mind boxes comprises emotional patterns, sense of boundary, understanding of the archetypical setting of the world around, and my own personal identity. And these particular cosmologies are communicating all of them at the same time from each and all those different ages. From the human development world, we have probably heard that people speak of our inner child. Maybe you have heard that expression, no? Oh, I have to take care of my inner child. Yes, that is correct. There is an inner child within us. The problem is that he has to mature because nothing stays at the same age in life. It has to progress. The life cycle of that particular aspect, my inner child, was stuck in its life cycle, and it has to be helped to reach the present age in the here and now, to meet myself and integrate. So the healing process, in order to attain an authentic self, implies to heal those particular cosmologies, to heal that particular aspect of the inner child. It is called in the clean language community the inner child recovery. These definitory moments and these cosmologies are the sources for much of our present mental health and mental setting challenges. Why? Because whenever this dissociation happens, the life force, the psychic force I am investing in life is divided, and that energy stays away. So I need to self-regulate, but that self-regulation is not efficient. So my life force is not fully operating in my body. There is a waste of energy. This creates also mental noise. This mental noise is the communication of all these aspects which need to be integrated. As a way of measurement, you can observe your mental chatter, the chipmunk in the head, as someone expressed it yesterday, and that will be an index of how much communication the different aspects of self are operating in myself. So that's a good way to qualify how our mental health and the number of dissociative structures we are holding in our lives. And of course, the burnout, which is a common challenge in our present days, is going to emerge. Since we have a loss of life force and we haven't got clarity, the natural consequence is burnout. The hemisphere functions of the right side of the brain are going to reduce. Our ability to manage, regulate our emotions is going to be hindered. Our ability to be creative is going to be limited. Our empathy is going to be distorted. Therefore, we're going to follow a pattern of toxic games. Toxic games, in a personal or individual sense, they can be seen as politics, manipulation, abuse, all these toxic situations that with the pandemic at the moment, they have been increasing in the household because we are forced to interact in a different setting, and these are stress drivers that we need to resolve. But not only this, the toxic games are also sociopathic in terms of society. We see these toxic games like divide and conquer, bread and circuses, no? So the political arena and much of the normalization of their cultural behaviors, they are toxic by nature. The problem is that we are so involved into the social matrix that we don't appreciate it fully. Nevertheless, those toxic games are consequences of these fragmentations. So in a sense, we are collaborating in a social kind of disease. Therefore, there is resistance to change. There is rigidity in our mind structures. So when we are faced uncertainty, when we need to navigate amidst chaos, the first trigger we have is stress responses, as we've seen in the first conference we had, and that resists us for changing as we are demanded by life. We have psychological defenses. It is very common that we don't like to see our darker self. So we negate, we justify, we rationalize, and we do so many other strategies in order not to face our own divisions internally, and therefore the consequences of our behaviors. And therefore we end up creating disease. Psychosomatic diseases are mostly the ruling stages of health condition, obesity, and many others. They have a component of psychosomatic aspect that if we can organize and heal it, is going to be a source of improvement in our health. And then we can have systemic collapse. I'm going to share you a very interesting example that just came up with research after COVID. We know that the first comorbid condition for fatalities with the coronavirus is obesity. And as we saw, obesity has a psychological component. Recently, it has been observed that anxiety is the second most important comorbid aspect in the fatalities of coronavirus. Then the third is heart disease, and the fourth is diabetes, and so on. So from this, we can conclude that the coronavirus is placing in our faces a very important aspect of a pandemic, which is even more important, and is the mental health one. A systemic collapse, as an example, following the coronavirus crisis, the body starts to react through the negative feedback from the disease, and the immune system starts triggering a response. This response is not only enough, but distorts itself within the virus, and at the end, people die because the immune system killed the body, not because the virus was the driving force. So it's very interesting to see how throughout these patterns of emotional health, we can create the conditions in which our body even does not respond properly to the feedback it's receiving from the environment. This is the reason we have a mental health crisis that we need to tackle. This is the elephant in the room. This is the real pandemic we need to change. Because if we don't tackle these particular situations, we're going to face difficulties facing new responsibilities with the climate change, just to name a few examples. So when we have this situation in which the flow of consciousness is interrupted, we create a chaotic system. The chaotic system is based on a very, very fundamental and simple initial conditions. These conditions are these two set of attractors, which are in attractive dynamic movement between themselves, and from this situation emerges a chaotic self. This is the source of our mind structures, and this is the kind of structures that we need to address and how to understand them. We have these two attractors in place, which operate in a context in time and space. It has its own origins, and it will deliver a result. It is up to us if we want to change the destiny of these systems by healing them. But first, let's understand how is it that the definitive moments apply in our brain-body system. There are left hemisphere trauma structures and right side of the brain structures. The left side of the brain structures are hierarchical, and they are organized in a sense of different patterns of organization. We're going to explore them further. And then we have the right side of the brain experience, which is paradoxically to be trapped in an eternal loop, like if we are squirrels in the wheel. So these are the two aspects of our traumatized selves when it comes to the operations of the brain. We have two different kind of definitory moments. One is digital, meaning that there is an impact which is so intense in its force that creates traumatized structures in that very moment. It's like a switch, on and off. And there is analog trauma, which is the constant exposure to different situations, which at the end will create these traumatized structures. For example, when we are facing an abusive relation when we are children. If we have the constant input of a parent telling us that we are not good, eventually that repetition of experience will create a trauma by itself. So we have these two different kind of traumas that they have to be approached in a different way. How is it that we structure our lives in the left side of the brain operational modalities? This is the most important kind of structures we have, because culturally we have been lateralizing our operations because of the development of everyday life. We are highly rationalized and logical societies, so therefore the definitory moments and the cosmologies are related in this particular structure. The first level of the structure is the most important because that's where the genetical inheritance defines us. We have the DNA, the physicality that we inherit from our parents, but we have the ancestral DNA, which comes from our past generations' cultural background. From evolutionary biology, we have the term meme. It is very common now that you have these fun pictures that are called memes because they are called like that because they have an imprint culturally, and then they are operational modalities of understanding. So in terms of ancestral lineage, we are constantly giving to the next generations our psychological influence, and therefore when we are conceived, that also comes in the package. So that's the base of the pyramid on how our mind structures are built. In the next level, we have the environment or beingness, that is being the body. Our body is a whole environment as a whole. Every system interconnected gives us the information necessarily to make decisions throughout our life. In that regards, it applies also to an organization or to a family as it is. It is fractal, so these structures is valid for any kind of experience. And because our body is a kind of an antenna, now we have to express the energy in the way of energetic cycle that I showed you before. This level implies the emotional projective field that we have as people. We're constantly irradiating energy, and the world around senses that energy and responds with the same kind of experience. Therefore, we have an energetic relation with the world. These two levels are the ones that explain how is it that mind-body system relates with the world. This is where the attractors I've mentioned set down, and this is where most of our emotional structures are developed. If we are to attain emotional intelligence in our life, it is important that we address the structures that were imprinted at this level. So this is where the important work as human development professionals we have to focus, or this is the kind of work that any person who wants to attain the authentic self needs to address. Why? Because everything at the top of the pyramid is based and organized in these regards. After we have this projection and energies around, and we receive this energy in our bodies, we have to develop a sense of boundaries. This sense of boundaries has rules. Let me give you an example. If I have developed a structure which is based on fear, and I am navigating in my everyday business in life, and suddenly I start operating within a boundary which will inform my mind and my brain about a perceived danger, and that will trigger a sense of response which will operate with certain rules. For example, the fight or flight response, which is very instinctual, actually comes from the reptilian brain. When I have the boundary close to me and my brain and my body system interprets this as a danger, a fear flight response will trigger, and the rules will say, if I cross that boundary, I will have to fight in order to protect myself, or the option is to fly in order to escape that perceived danger. That would be an example of how we set boundaries in regards to what we perceive as danger or helpful. Another example, it would be like an addiction. Someone who has a problem with addiction has no sense of boundaries. Throughout the different expressions in its addiction, the boundaries will be lost. So when the boundaries are lost, there are also rules. The body will destroy itself, or it will make some kind of behaviors that will have bad consequences. These sets of boundaries are the first structures from which our sense of morality and values are seated. So someone who behaves morally will be seated in a very healthy set of boundaries. So we're not talking about set of beliefs yet. We're talking about how our system will inform what is appropriate and what it isn't. Our ability of empathy operates in this level. The more empathic we are, the less we're going to act violently or transgress social values. But these boundaries, we have to organize them cognitively, unconsciously and unconsciously as well. So we have to develop certain understanding according to games, myth, and stories. When we are little babies, we begin interacting in our social world, and it is through games that we start to understand how is it that interactions operate. You have a little baby and you can play peekaboo. You hide your face and then you appear. And the kid, the little baby, will start reacting to that input and will start doing the same, because we learn by repetition of what we perceive in the world around. So that sets the first stages on how through games we learn to interact. Another expression of these games is at school, hide and seek, tit for tat, and then we start understanding the rules of the games we play socially and how the consequences of those games are. For example, the roles we play in life. Sometimes we are in the power position, sometimes we are in the victim position. And that elaborates further as we grow adults. So the stage in which we learn through games, which is very important in terms of the children, that's why they need to socialize. It's because they develop this social intelligence by interaction through games. But then we have to organize our lives in more sophisticated games. This is where the work of archetypes from Jung comes to be. The archetypical games are those stories which fit the structures we already have developed in our lives. You can probably from everyday culture see that somebody is the Prince Charming, somebody is the princess, someone else is playing the Peter Pan syndrome, which reflects someone who is very childish. So we can understand that people associate themselves with different games. When Jung expressed the idea of archetypes, he was expressing very generalized identities: the warrior, the patriarch, the mother, the wizard. But those particular personas, they need a story to be part of. And this is where we interact with people in terms of our different stories. But if we're going to play in a story, we understand that each part of the story has its own role or persona. So we have to play that role. For instance, let's say someone is playing the story of Peter Pan, and as we said, it has the Peter Pan syndrome. It's very childish, someone who plays along with no responsibility, as we know. But in the same story, there is the pirate. The pirate cannot behave as Peter Pan. If my particular structure fits the story of Peter Pan, I will identify with one of those roles. Maybe I'm Tinkerbell, maybe I'm one of the Lost Boys, or maybe I'm the crocodile. So we play these roles, and these roles are triggered when the contextual expression of our experience of our life shows us the way. This is when our unconscious behaviors emerge. We can see that socially are regulated in a way that it's unconscious. But if you start to look at people and you want to play to check what is it the story we are being played here, you're going to see how magically a set of information is going to emerge, and you can appreciate the different games in the different stories we are trapped. Having this intelligence socially is amazing, because then you can relate with people, talking with the unconscious structures from which people is operating. And it's beautifully, because this gives you a lot of compassion once you understand the games people are playing. And this sophistication, it implies that each persona will have a set of strategy and tactics. There are events in which the person can embody two different roles at the same time. So we have like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from time to time. This in a clinical stage is very interesting, because people have these dark sides that come on and off depending on the different contextual settings they are operating. This strategy and tactics are related to a person's set of vocational orientations, our inclinations to develop a certain kind of skill or preference in life. Some people are very social. Some people like to engage in the environment rather than in the office. Some people are more inclined intellectually. Some people are more engaged into crafts or engineering stuff. So all these personal traits will be dependent on what is it that the most important cosmologies have been structured, and they are identifying in these particular archetypes. This is the map of how the social tribes behave. And from this strategy and tactics, we will develop the ability to interact with our environment, the ability to diplomacy, the way we are going to relate with people, and we're going to collaborate or not. So this is the way of our left hemisphere operates within the cosmologies that have been created. These particular structures you see here are very useful to diagnose what is it happening in an organization, in a family, or a person. Let me give you an example of archetypes, and we use Apple Computer as an example because it's a common brand in the field. If you recall the ancient times of Apple computers and you see the original logo, what is it that you see? Apple computers first thought or first planned that the apple was related to Newton. It was the apple that fell from the tree and allowed apparently Newton to create his physics model of Newtonian physics. But there is a trick here. You have to read the signals of the story around. So the apple has 7 colors, 7 dwarfs. The apple is beaten, okay? If you see the hardware of Apple computers, it is very nicely designed, but it looks like the mirror in the wall. Do you see where I'm going with this analysis of the signals in the computer, in the brand? So unconsciously, what is happening in Apple computer is that they are playing Snow White. The engineers are the dwarfs that are creating the diamonds in the mining. The legal corporate area of Apple computers plays the role of the witch. So you can see that there is an unconscious reflection of the owner, Steve Jobs, in the design of the computing, his computer and everything around. So as you can see, the unconscious structures that are working on each and all of us, even socially, they emerge and present signals not only on how the arrangements unconsciously are, but if we are to heal, if we were following the crumbs of the story we are playing. So if we want to heal, we need to listen to these kind of unconscious signals, and we'll find the way to the best healing possible because it's efficient by nature. So this is just a sample of how is it that life is organized in a structural way. It's a model of reality. From this model, we have tools to solve any kind of problems. So let's go to the next kind of situation or defining moments, which is related in time. For that, we have to explore time beyond time. I want to make a brief reflection here. What you see here, it's an ancestral stone representing death. In my culture in Mexico, it is very important, the relation with this aspect of life. They come together. So we have a particular understanding of and relation to that, which is very, very unique. There are other cultures which have this particular set of beliefs. And it is important because in these present times with the coronavirus, what is being visualized is a moment in which not only death, because people are dying. I hope that no one in your family or friends have been affected by this, by the way. I hardly do so. But we have to understand that an important aspect of life is to face death. Why? Because socially and individually, facing the termination of cycles is one of the most important triggers of psychosis and mental problems. We have been avoiding the nature of life. So we resist change because we perceive that there will be termination in the life cycle. So these present times allows us to see this with wise eyes because we're facing termination in many ways. Not only people that are dying because of the pandemic, people are losing their sources of income. We are changing our social dynamics. Our children, for example, they have lost an environment of learning from which they develop their social skills. They have lost the ability to explore the environment rather to be secluded in one place. So they have lost a lot. And I'm not sure how is it that you're tackling this situation in your country. In mine, it's very challenging because we are not facing this particular set of events properly. We are not facing the new cycles that come with death. So culturally, we have to understand that there is a big social trauma because fear has been going on for a year and a half. So we have an analog process in which each of us have been experiencing a definitory moment. Life won't be the same for any of us from this moment on. We have to understand and we have to appreciate that throughout the history of humanity, pandemic crises have brought big changes in society. The medieval feudal system collapsed with the plague. The Spanish flu was a condition that helped for the Great War to finish. So we can see that with these particular events, we are facing the end of cycles, which is one of the many kind of traumas or definitory moments that we are going to face. So we have an ancestral cultural expression of trauma, which is expressed by the pandemic as an example. And we have a particular definitory moments in the retirement phase of the life cycles, termination of things. So we have to understand that that is one of many of the definitory moments that we experience. This particular chart will show the different kind of traumatizing events that we can experience and which will define us. There will be a before and after from that particular kind of expression. So we have first in the initial part of the cycle, the requiring kind of definitory moments. Anything that is badly designed in a project, if we have been experiencing limitational experiences in the womb development stage, if we don't have the proper initial conditions in a romantic relationship, those particular definitory moments will define the rest of the cycle. As we say in Mexico, whatever begins well will end well. Whatever begins poorly will end poorly. So the initial conditions on any situation, it's paramount to protect or heal if it was the need. When we are being developed in our mother's womb, from the very moment of the egg cell, we have this ability to interact consciously with our environment. It is a very safe environment. Nevertheless, if there is something not very tragic, like my mother probably falling in the stairs, nothing happened physically, but there was an interaction of chemical substances, no? Cortisol, adrenaline, for example, muscle contraction, and that will be a signal that will imprint into the fetus a certain definitory moment from which the fetus will keep developing. And it might happen or not happen that more definitory moments experienced in the womb the level of development. Then we go to the birth experience. Birth experience by nature is traumatizing. That will set up the initial conditions for different structures of mind. Let me share you a personal experience. I was born with forceps. Forceps, it's like pliers in your forehead, and it's like pulling a cork out of the bottle. I cannot imagine a more traumatizing way to initiate your life in this plane. In my particular experience, because this expression of self was built within a conflict, I personally had a very conflictive youth, because the patterns that were developed from that previous young fetus, which was frozen, it was living in a fight because that was the signal imprinted in the birth time. So for me, the healing process was very strong because I have imprinted in myself a very strong traumatizing experience of birth. Someone could have a different definitory moments if they are birthed with the umbilical cord in the head, for example, or some other birth conditions might happen, like probably coming in the other opposite direction. All of that expression will create imprints in our mind-body system, which will create the conditions for us to develop differently throughout our lives. And that will bring structures of dissociative nature. So once that happens, the next stage is adapting to those changes. We usually adapt as a way of survival or coping with our environment. We seldomly use these expressions. If we hear people with attention, we will hear, oh, I used to live in a very violent neighborhood, so I turned into a very aggressive guy. Oh, I am very shy because I was bullied in school, so I was very reserved. So by those expressions, we can see that we do it to ourselves in order to adapt. Another expression on adaptation in the social terms, we can see now that there is a conflict between the people who have chosen to vaccinate themselves and those who are not being vaccinated. And the adaptation we are having socially, it's an us versus them game. People who don't like vaccinations oppose the ones who are vaccinated, and opposite, and we have conflict. The maladaptation of this process is very relevant because rather than having a conflict between these two opposite perspectives of life, the rule of the game is collective immunity. I don't like the word herd, collective immunity. If we can change the rules of the game and focus everyone in collective immunity, what we will have is a collaboration between those who are vaccinated and those who aren't, rather than a conflict, which is being triggered by the media, by the way, no? So you can see how a maladaptation happens, and we can heal by changing our point of perspective. This is a very nice example of what's going on and allows us to understand the adaptation-maladaptation cycle. Then we have mislearnings. We have this saying, school is a very dangerous place. And I'm going to tell you why. When we are learning, we usually adapt that body of knowledge that is presented to us. This learning can be mislearned, meaning that the information we are using is erroneous. So we have to change that information. If we believe that the earth is flat, that is a mislearning. We have to learn that the world is not flat. It's a cycle, an orb. Then we have the learnings which are needed to upgrade, because most of the learnings change throughout time. So we need to upgrade our learnings in order not to be stuck with past learnings. That's another example. Another example would be insufficient learnings. So we have to expand our body of knowledge in order to be fully informed. Those are the different expressions of learning, but there's also more to this part. The conventional educational system, the traditional schooling system, is a reflection of the industrial age. When the industrial revolution started, the need to produce, to do mass productions implied the creation of industrial lines of production. If you see the school system, it's just the same. We produce education as if it was a line of production in any industry. So we have the children by blocks, first grade, second grade, third grade, and so on. What we're doing is we're boxing the kids rather than allow them to integrate and use the diversity of life, social life, to learn better social abilities. That's one of the failures of the actual educational system. Another important traumatizing aspect of the learning stage would be the authority figures. Usually when we are in school, we are indoctrinated to follow the authority figure. The teacher is the one who knows what is to be known. The teacher tells us when. The teacher tells us why. So what we learn is to obey rather than to use our exploration and self-authority skills. In regards of this particular experience, by constant repetition, what happens is that people dissociate from their ability of self-decision and exploration. When we grow older, we tend to follow figures, political figures of authority, because we have lost that particular aspect of self that makes us explore different opportunities of learning, but also opinions in the political games. And this is why people tend to obey rather than to judge the political performance of their leaders. So as we see, school is dangerous because they steal from us these abilities to rely on our own capabilities and to be able to judge rather than follow. So this is an important stage, particularly in the kids. As a countermeasure to this, you see different learning styles like Montessori or Waldorf schooling, which particularly they solve this particular situation with the authority figures. The best approach probably would be homeschooling, which something that now happened with the pandemic is that we can rely on homeschooling as well. We just need we need to learn how to do it properly. By the way, I personally am facilitating mothers that they have chosen to raise and to have their kids to learn in school. I believe in other countries like Great Britain, the educational system gives a lot of support in order for families to be able to homeschool. So this is an opportunity that we see in the midst of the pandemic, because now that we are forced to have our children in school for some times, maybe we can try to learn how to educate them in school. It's a good challenge, and believe me, the results are amazing. The next trauma we have is in the level of identity. We usually identify with things that are not real. One of the most obvious examples is the notion of a nation. We identify with all those abstractions of national identity, the flag, the national hymns, but that's not really us. Nevertheless, we have a strong identity to that particular cultural setting. We identify with what our family presents us, so we are part of a family nucleus that identifies with a set of values and strategies and needs, and that is okay. But sometimes that identification is not very proper. An example for this, let's go into the business environment. Sometimes you could have a very good executive, someone who is a great salesman. So the owner of the business says, he'd rather be a manager. He probably is going to help me to create good salespeople for my business. So I promote him to be a sales manager. The probable challenge is that this person might not be able to transition from one identity to another. So he will stop with the behaviors proper to the salesman rather than be able to lead a group of people. So that would be a disappointment or a big challenge, because we have to train and coach this guy in order for him to understand that now he's a manager, he's not a follower. Another example would be probably a policeman. He has to suit himself in the identity and position of authority in the streets, be very vertical in his behaviors, because that's what authority does. But when he goes back to his house, he has to take out his uniform, and he has to be a very empathic and collaborative person in their house. The problem is when we cannot understand that we have to play our roles differently, and we are stuck with the strategies of a different identity. This is very important, because flexibility comes when we are able to upgrade what we think we really are. It is very challenging, because if we really face who we are, we're going to be naked like the emperor with the new clothes, nothing to wear, because we are just humans. So identity plays a good joke on us. Then we go to the kind of definitory moments, which have to be with habits. We seldomly develop behaviors because they serve us. So we have good and bad habits: punctuality, cleanliness, the discipline, and that's very nice. But some habits are not very good. Let's say we smoke a lot, we bite our nails, we're constantly putting something in our mouth because we need to manage our anxiety. So the question begins, is this a habit that I can change very easily, or it's a habit which is influenced by a deeper structure? When we have an oral fixation, the question would be, is that oral fixation just a habit to manage my anxiety? Or maybe there is a younger self which in the oral stage was experiencing an important situation, a definitive moment, and I just need to suck on my mom's teeth because that gives me a sense of connection, security, and nourishment. So as you see, surface behaviors can be based on more deep structures that need to be addressed. And as you can see, this kaleidoscope of experiences will create an interaction between the different aspects of the definitory moments. Each of our aspects of self, these cosmologies I described that comprises our internal collective, operate with this particular set of structures. We are like a kaleidoscope that will behave accordingly to these different dynamics. If we use the modern language, this is our personal algorithm. An algorithm is a set of instructions that will end up in a result, just like a computer program. So this is the software that we have inherited from our cultural background, that we have created throughout our definitory moments, and that it is unconsciously operating and creating this important noise in our back that limits us this particular experience of mindfulness. So if we are to attain this mindfulness state of being, from which we are conscious of what's going on in order to regulate our emotions and our behaviors, it is important that we address the basic structures that were created in the initial stages of life. Of course, this is like taking the red pill and the blue pill, like the Matrix. The choice is yours, of course. You are able to choose your own focus of development and work yourself in order to attain this authentic self. So this structure will give us an idea of how it is that we are internally divided and fractured. This is a representation of the internal collective. If we are brave enough to face ourselves in the mirrors as we really are, and that is the most fearful experience, if we do that, if we take these decisions in our lives, the promise is to be expanded, wholesome, and clean. And this will allow us to express the more authenticity in our lives, and therefore the more functionality in our life systems, whether it's personally, in our family, or in our place of work, or in the present community challenges we might face locally. So the promise is very good. If we inspire in this particular quote, it is no measure of health to be well adapted to a sick world. We have to see ourselves in the mirror as leaders and assess what is it that we really want. Where are we going? Are we normalizing and playing along with the conditions that we inherited from this diseased world, traumatized throughout the histories? We have definitive moments throughout histories that we can learn. We had the Second World War, we have the pandemic, the Second World War, the Great War, and so forth. So the flow of events in life, it's full of definitory moments that create a social collective that influence us very deeply. And we are not judges of that particular influence, at least not mindfully. When we see the world and we see how maladapted it is, the decision is us to play along, and it's all in your right decision. There is no judgment there, and do it in a helpful and very healthy way. Or we can be agents of change and be brave enough to put the finger in the wound and allow ourselves to heal the planet, so we can make this negative feedback of the climate change and some other problems in our life easier on our fellow humans. This is a challenge we face. But how do we face this in the face of working with our own personal development? Let's speak a bit of intervention with these tools. Emergence and psychoactivity. This is something that John Farrell will speak further, so I'll be very brief on this subject so he can expand on the subject. Emergence and psychoactivity is a phenomena and a feature of our mind, but not mind as individuals. We have to ask ourselves, is the mind in us, or we are seated in the mind? This is a very nice paradox, because we are connected through this subtle matrix of energy that interacts invisibly with the universe, we included. And emergence is this faculty in which, from the therapeutical perspective, we allow deeper structures to emerge, as the word portrays, and by that emergence, our internal psychic apparatus can make the proper generalizations of information, like joining the dots, in order to have a full picture of a focus of consciousness. and therefore this emergence will allow naturally to self-organize, because we are allowing the structures to emerge in the way they were created in the first stance. In order to relieve ourselves from the measurements that we have created in life, we have to remeasure them again. So we have to find a way for those structures to emerge in order to work with them. And this works through psychoactivity. Psychoactivity is this faculty of the mind to be malleable, flexible, in order to manage the change we want to attain. We will have a demonstration of how emergence and psychoactivity not really, but emergence will do very nicely, with a demonstration of a process. It's called the issue buster, which, by the way, you will have a free access to a online coaching platform. Will you experience this deeply? Today, we're gonna have a diluted experience because of the time of the distance. Okay, psychoactivity and emergence, it's a phenomena that has been attained through different means. One of the most easiest and ancient ways of doing it is through breathing. There are ancient breathing techniques, particularly in India, called pranayama, which are focused into breathing in order to balance the operation of both hemispheres of the brain. That will allow the mind and the body to relax. With that relaxation, we will attain very slight trance states, meditation states, that if we go further and further, will allow us to have revelation about ourselves and about the world. And that is the promise of the spiritual meditational practices, or mindfulness as one of many more. There is another technique which is more modern, which was developed by Stanislav Grof, the father or the founder of the transpersonal psychology movement. This breathing technique is called holotropic breathing, and this technique is focused to heighten this trance state and allow the emergence of the structures related to the womb experience. There is in the internet a very interesting documentary about Stanislav Grof. I highly recommend it, because he developed this technique, which is very powerful and allows to very deep healing. So as we see, breathing is one of the many techniques in order to attain this emergence and psychoactivity. There is another one, which culturally it's a bit challenging. The lady in the picture is Maria Sabina. She's a Mexican shaman, and she turned very famous because she used mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms, to allow people to get into very deep psychoactivity states. This psychoactivity is very strong and powerful. Walt Disney came to this shaman, and if you see Snow White, instead of flowers, the whole picture has mushrooms. So that's a homage to his experience with this lady. The psychoactivity, which is attained by psychoactive substances, allow this very intense loss of control, the exaltation of psychedelic images that can create integration in ways that are not under the control of the person. So this particular way of emergence and psychoactivity is not very suggested unless you have the proper temperament and you are willing to let go of all your controls. So it's very powerful, but mind you, it's not for everyone. Nevertheless, what we want to understand, there is some phenomena in mind that we can use in our own benefit. The next picture, this is a lovely experience that we had in our retreats. This is an expression of art which was facilitated with clean language, which is something that we're going to use, and John will speak further, I hope. Clean language is a set of questions which are non-manipulative and allow for the emergence of information throughout an experience, in this case of the expression of art. This particular mural was built after 4 days of working with this particular setting of development. Throughout this process, we were giving questions to the client, so she was placing information, and finally she ended with this mural. The process finished when she placed the blue dot within the petals of the flower you can appreciate in the right side of the screen. When she placed that piece of paper in the whole mural, It was the moment in which the emergence fulfilled the reintegration of the dissociated aspect of self. When that happened, it was amazing. For 2 days, this client was predicting the future. She would predict that a car alarm was setting off. She would say when the cook will tell us that the food was ready. She could anticipate whenever someone was going to cry because was facing strong experiences within the retreat setting. Having that kind of expression of total integration with the universe and be able to collect information from the ether, it is most interesting experience of mine. This is when personally I'm very humbled to see that we are part of that universal fiber of oneness that we hopefully can attain throughout our practices and development. So this is one way of attaining emergence throughout creative expression. Another one would be throughout movement and location. This is another principle that works with our structures. This apparatus allows us to place people in fetal positions. By doing so with the fetal positions and the clean language we use, we allow for the most important and deep structures to emerge in order to solve them. This particular work starts creating this psychoactivity throughout the exposition of the questions and this particular set of exercises with the machine. In the picture, you can see Pam Saunders, the founder of the method and the inventor of this apparatus. The apparatus is in Mexico and is not being used because right now we're not having retreats. It's because of the pandemic. So the way of allowing emergence can be through location in place in time and space, as you can see in this particular exercise, or throughout creative expression, which pertains to the right hemisphere of the brain. What we attain through emergence is the ability to then psychoactively restructure our own mind in order to be more efficient, to integrate those aspects, those cosmologies, in order to have a cleaner self and therefore to be able to be resilient and adaptable, to be clear of mind and be able to intuitively read the signals of the world, to be able to collaborate, because if we are more empathic, we understand, we feel what other people feel. Therefore, we have this compassionate structure of self that can allow to serve selflessly to the others. So in this sense, what we can attain by working in order to achieve this authentic self is to be the best versions we can be of ourselves. Let's then, because the presentation has arrived to a finish, let's do a bit of an exercise. Let me just check on the time. I'm not sure how we're doing. I have no vision of the. Okay. I hope you have pen and paper. If you don't, I can give you couple of minutes so you can get some paper so you can write down what we're going to do. Just allow me to do this in this. Sorry, I cannot see properly. Okay, so if you have pen and paper, and if one of my hosts can help me to check on the boxes from the text, so you can text me so I can know that you are ready to proceed, at least with most of the people in the conference. I would like to know if you are ready so we can proceed.
Lots of ready.
Okay.
Lots of ready.
Okay, so we're ready to proceed. This is a very diluted way of understanding how emergence works, and we're going to use clean language, which is the approach to psychology we use with the Holigral Method. So you're going to choose a subject of study. Let's make it a very light matter. Maybe you want to explore a particular project in your work. Maybe you want to explore a particular stage in your life, something that you are interested to explore further. And what you're going to do is you are going to write down as much as you know about that particular subject of your choosing. You can make a signs, a small drawing, anything that can help you represent the particularities of the subject at hand. And if you can raise your hand in the conversation box, I'll be thankful so I can proceed into the next step.
So a couple of people have said that they've written their first sentence down, their first subject.
Okay, so if you have finished to download the information, then let's proceed. This exercise is made of pattern of questions. The first pattern of questions is the following. You are going to ask yourself about that particular information you wrote down. You are going to ask, what do I know about that? And then write down the answer in relation to what you just downloaded about your subject of choice. Just a brief description. We're just exploring. You will have the opportunity to do this further and deeper in the free platform I'm sharing with you. Okay. If you can help me with the timing, John, so you can give me the cue for the next question, I would appreciate it.
Okay. I think your timing's right for the next question.
Perfect. So now you're going to ask to that last answer the following. And what else do I know about that? So you will question your previous answer.
Okay, I think you can go on.
Okay. Then you will ask to the last answer the following. And what else do I know about that?
Okay.
Fine. And as a way of conclusion, you will ask, and now, what do I know? What is it that you know after all the information you have downloaded? And now, what do I know?
Okay.
Fine. Then we'll proceed to the next set of questions. So you're going to ask yourself from the last answer, and what does that know about me? It's like if that answer, that last answer is mirroring to you information. And what does that know about me?
Okay.
Fine. Then you will ask again to the last question. And what else does that know about me? So if you have finished, you can do it again. And what else does that know about me?
Okay.
Then you ask, and now what do I know?
Okay.
Then you will proceed to the next set of questions and you will ask to your last answer. And is there anything else about that? And once you finish, you can ask yourself again, and is there anything else about that? Then you proceed again to ask the question, and is there anything else about that? And then you finish this set of questions, applying the next one. And now, what do I know? As you can see, the spirit of this exercise is to apply iterative questions to each answer. And that is the logic. So let's proceed to the next question. If you're finished, take your time. If you haven't, there's no rush. And then the next question to the last answer would be, and where could that have come from? And then you ask to the last answer, and where could that have come from?
Okay.
And then we ask as a conclusion, and now what do I know? Okay, let's explore further. We have a set of questions. And now, what can happen?
Okay.
And then you question again, and now, what can happen? And then again, and now, what can happen? And then the last one, and now, what do I know? Let's now proceed to the last set of questions. Let's push it a little bit further. Oops. Okay. The last question is, and is there anything else?
Okay.
And again to the last answer, and is there anything else? And then again, and is there anything else?
Okay.
And then we proceed with the very last one. And now, what do I know?
Okay.
Excellent. We have finished this particular practice. And with this, I think we can proceed to the Q&A. Let me just bring out the, perfect. I can see you properly. Well, thank you very much for your time, your interest, and we can proceed to questions and answers. Maybe if you would like to share a bit of the experience of the exercise we just experienced. And I'm checking on the commentary boxes because there's a lot to read. Okay, I'm open to questions. Okay, someone was born with forceps, Taliban, Mernosh. Yeah, we can share a bit of our experience later. If you can contact me, I'll be more than happy. I'm just checking on the comment boxes. Let me see from Thessaloniki, Roxani. Everybody loves you here. Greetings from Mexico. Yeah, thank you. If you haven't finished with the exercise, just keep going. The collective identity that relies on surroundings and environment or possesses no sense of belonging of a group. Yes, that's right. Asma, we share the same impressions.
Dr. Rahman has a question on there. Thanks, Georgie, for the great information. Love the exercise. How to go deeper.
Thank you very much. I hope my English was clear enough, and if it's needed, I can explain further. There's a lot of information with all this. I'm just trying to pack it easily. It's really a body of knowledge that can go, you know, the expression, how deep the rabbit hole goes, no? This is something like that. So yes, I'm open to the questions. Venkat, I think you were asking. Can't see the hands.
So Dr. Rahman's asking there, how to go deeper?
Okay, the way to go deeper is to take proper time and to have a proper space with no distractions. And what we do is to work through drawings, mostly because we're going to download as much as possible in order to unconsciously project into this work all the structures that comprise our internal reality. This is a process that is called rescaling, and you keep downloading and downloading and downloading and exploring the boundaries of what you are downloading and expressing in the papers. When you are doing that, you're expanding your awareness beyond your sense of boundary. And it's like an example of walking away from the tree in order to distinguish the tree from the forest. So by doing that, what you're going to face, and it is a very deep process, you're going to face a lot of information which unconsciously is tailored as patterns. And as those patterns emerge through the questions, you start to having the realizations needed in order to allow the system to regulate itself naturally. So the emergence of all this information will just make your system to heal itself. There is no need to guide, there is no need to control or to facilitate with techniques. It's just to allow the natural self to emerge and make the proper interaction, because at the end there is intelligence, and this intelligence will operate in the same fashion as I explained through the theory systems principles. So this self-regulation organizational system, what we just need is to give the proper setting in order to self-heal. The best way to do it, it's in a retreat environment, because this can take days. For some people, depending on their structures, for example, I've helped people with a big story of abuse. They usually need like 2-3 retreats in order to reinvent themselves. First, they heal the deeper attractors that are holding their structures. Afterwards, they need to understand the world around to release themselves from the projections of the collective, all the judgments, all the emotions, all the expectations that we have been imprinted by the world around. And once we release ourselves from that tyranny, if we may, we have proper understanding of how can we relate with that, and then we can proceed to develop our project of life. Because then we have the clarity to have a personal vision in life, and they'll build upon abilities, skills, probably a project management if that's needed. So for some people, depending on their life experience, they need a lot of time for healing. Some people, regular people, just 7 days will do nicely in order to allow this exercise to do their trick.
There's some quite deep questions here, Georgie, and we've been on here for 2 hours already. The next one is, does trauma store in our subconscious forever? If yes, how can we wall off that trauma from our subconscious? That's a whole seminar presentation into itself, isn't it?
Indeed, certainly it is. Yes, it can happen. In my experience, you can help yourself in order to heal the deepest trauma stored in our system, but it depends on the trauma, what kind of structures they have built. For example, our mind-body system will create a response in which our body will adapt, and some of those adaptations, they cannot change. There is a certain degree of effect in our body. For example, I personally have Tourette's. Tourette's is a syndrome which some people say it's genetically originated. My experience is that it's trauma related. And I've worked with myself in my particular experience of birth. Nevertheless, my neurological physiology has created the conditions to have a maladaptation in the dopamine production system. So in that case, the trauma has had a long-lasting impact. Nevertheless, I can manage my own situation in order to adapt properly to this set of conditions. These kind of situations are very naturally healed if we have the proper work. But there is a word of advice, because we have built our systems, our life systems, depending on these structures. So for some people, going as deep as to change those structures will mean that their whole reality will collapse, and whatever they have built might not necessarily be in the best interest of that person. Nevertheless, it's in the best interest of their system. So there is a moment in which change should not be done because the consequences are very important. So there is a place in the process in which we are in need to facilitate with that reservation. The kind of work I do allows for the life cycle of any trauma to finish. So in that regards, if our attractors are provoking that we have, let's say, a toxic marriage, and we are in a way kind of obliged to fulfill that relation, when the life cycle happens, whatever needs to be finished, even if it's a marriage, will finish. I've seen situations like this, but the interesting aspect is the way it finishes is very sustainable, meaning that the way we manage that cycle is very humane in the sense that we consider others. People have reported me that if it wasn't because of the work they did, the marriage would turn even more sour. And eventually the separation would be very painful, legal matters and so forth. But it didn't happen that way. It happened with compassion. It happened with good communication and agreements, good negotiations, and eventually it was meant to happen, but it happened in the right way. So yes, the traumas can be stored forever, or sometimes we rather let them be because we already have normalized them and the consequences might not be in the best interest of everybody. So yes, a whole seminar for this particular.
Thank you, Georgie. I'm going to have to go now. It's been a little while, but can I just say that you spent so much time doing the detail and the information that my one is going to have to be all practical. Yes, so certainly. Thank you for that. So my one in a couple of weeks will be much more practical now that you've covered all the technical stuff. It's been really fascinating. So I need to go. I'll just leave. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll just leave you with the next question. What is a normal response after one's experience to a traumatic event?
Well, the normal response first is to allow the shock to finish. There are certain shocking experiences that take its time. When we lost someone who is loved to us, there is a grieving process with stages. So we have to allow those stages to express themselves naturally. So any person will respond in a different manner depending on the traumatic event. Their normal response after the shock is the adaptation stage. That adaptation implies that you will allow your mind to make the assumptions needed in order to cope with the situation. That means that you may engage in a different way of relating to the world or to any person. Sometimes the traumas are so bad that you have to manage certain internal conditions like post-traumatic stress disorder. So trauma as a discipline, it's very, very wide because we have to understand what is it, the neurological physiology, the responding processes. We might develop some stress responses conditioned to that. So in a sense, we have to observe how is it that we are emerging, allow that emergence to flow in time, and allow our natural wisdom to inform us when is it the right time to heal this particular situation. Time heals everything, as we know. So we have to trust that time will do its bidding. Nevertheless, in relation to what we want, we have to respond with responsibility, meaning that we have the ability to respond. Therefore, we can engage in a certain practice, I don't know, mindfulness. Maybe we go to a therapist to speak this out. Maybe go to a punching bag and we just let our stress go or full on in a physical expression like sports. So it's very specific to the person. But the idea is to let the cycles to run naturally and eventually to address them in the best of your needs. Let me keep reading. Natasha from Russia. Dostoevskian question. Yes, I love them. Very existential. Someone who's prone to deep analysis but is never able to act upon the knowledge I learned about myself. So how to act starting upon this knowledge? It's very interesting, Natasha, because this is the mind chatter we have. My experience is when we clean our chatter, we have more abilities to navigate in our everyday experiences and act upon what the environment is informing. So what my perception will tell is that if you are too much into your mind, there is an aspect of the right side of the brain that is running in cycles. So we have to help that particular aspect to escape, like in escape velocity. So it will carry on with its life, but in the good way, it will carry on with the knowledge you have learned. So that will mean that the knowledge you have learned will be put into action in the best of your needs. So yes, it's important to observe how much you are trapped into the mind, because that will give you the cue on what kind of work you need to do. In this case, if you write me down, I can give you an exercise to see how it works. This would be a facilitation on distance, but I'm gladly to share. I hope that this is helpful. Is in danger to get stuck in self-analysis? Sometimes it's useful and sometimes it's very stressing. The body will tell you, because the body will stress as much as you are putting energy into any particular focus of interest. Is forceps birth a scientifically established trauma? Because it may explain my son's anxiety since youth. Also, I was pregnant with him during the Lebanese war and went through a lot of fear and anxiety. It must have, if your experience during the civil war was very stressful, that stress will be inherited to your boy through the blood, because you have cortisol and adrenaline in your system and you will share that with your kid. That will be an important imprint in his development. I have experienced opportunities to heal people from the very moment of conception. So those particular development stages are critical. Scientifically established the birth trauma. There is a very interesting study that was made in the United States throughout 20 years of observing what was the development in a person's depending on their birth conditions, whether it was through cesarea, whether they were birthed with the umbilical cord around, whether they were birthed with the back posture, and they observed patterns on how people behave. And in particularly with forceps, what was observed, there was a tendency to struggle in life because the signal they received, it was of conflict, physical conflict, and therefore there is anxiety with it. I can refer this as a properly scientific study. There must be more about this, and there is probably a community of people, of doctors who help anyone who have been through forceps birth, even legal matters, no? Because some malpractice might happen when the forceps are applied. So yes, it's important. It's a good insight you were sharing with us. Fantastic exercise. I hope, okay, you like the exercise. You can use this with your clients. You can do in a way, you would need a bit of training, because if you're going to work with people with abusive relationship, you may trigger a lot of emotional responses. So you should be prepared in order to hold the space in order to assist. And certainly this exercise can help you very well. Thank you very much. Detailed explanations. Write me down. Well, yes, these are the questions I'm finding here in the chat room. I'm not sure if you have a verbal interest to ask any questions as well. I'll be more than happy. The microphones are open.
Coach Jorge, there's one question here.
Yes.
Is there any way to make a change without all this external intervention?
Yes, there's always the chance to, there's always opportunities for change, certainly. Meditation is the most natural way of interacting with yourself. I found it from personal practice that it allows you to establish in a balanced lifestyle. Of course, it demands discipline. It's a constant practice every day to meditate. There are different techniques, whether they have philosophical backgrounds or just technical, that mindfulness techniques that we've been shared yesterday and the day before yesterday. So I think that's the easiest way, in order to attain a certain degree of change by your own means. At the end, you are your own judge of how well one approach will suffice your needs or not. I think meditation should be done since we are little kids. So I say that's the initial steps for you to assess if you can manage yourself through personal skills, or eventually you can resort to someone that can help you. I'm not sure if this is helpful for you. There's another question in the chat box. I was unable to attend the entire conference. There's a second chance to contact. Yes, well, the conference is online, and you have a free access to a platform where you can do a deeper experience of this process. You just have to write down in my email, which is in the presentation, or I will give you my email, or you can send me your emails, and then you have access to the platform immediately. It's already running. You can experience these processes for the whole month. Any more questions?
We have Mirnosh Talibian, their hand raised. Mirnosh, do you wish to unmute yourself? Or maybe we can skip to Caroline. Caroline Nejiga.
Mirnosh Talebian, Caroline Nagiga. Just unmute. I'm really here to listen to your questions.
Okay.
Hello, do you hear me? This is Mehnush. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Yes,
it's good, Mehnush.
Thank you so much for the brilliant information you shared with us today. I was born with the forceps, as you mentioned in your speech today. I didn't know that just being burned by this technique is source of trauma. So I was doing EMDR therapy to be aware of the trauma happened in my childhood. And my question is that, like, I was surprised today that forceps is source of trauma, and I didn't have any idea about that. How we can bring out the traumas that we are not aware of that? Is that just by meditation, or do we need to work with a specialist or therapist, or just meditation and self-concentration will help us to bring out whatever trauma we have in deeper layers of our subconsciousness? Thank you.
meditation will stabilize your own inner experience, and it will be very good. Nevertheless, there are certain kind of mind structures that are better helped by any particular assistance. You mentioned EMDR, which I recall is an energetic healing technique, which is very good. If that technique is working for you, you can apply it to your own experience of the birth trauma. If you didn't have that particular point of reference, you can explore, and if you want, you can write me down and we can share about that particular experience. I used to practice a bit with EFT, which is a similar technique. So I know that can help you very much. But I found something what I did with my personal experience. I faced my own birth trauma with these techniques, which were extraordinary and amazing. But when I had the chance to train with this particular method, what I discovered is that that particular dissociated aspect of self was still present in my life, regardless of the benefits I had experienced from my previous healing experience. For me, it was mind-blowing because in that particular experience, I engaged into a conversation with that dissociated aspect of self, which began informing me of many things that from my particular point of perspective were incomplete. So from that particular experience, Manoj, I can tell you that if you could allow yourself to work as deep as necessary to bring back that particular aspect which dissociated from the forceps birth trauma, the results are going to be amazing. The degree of emotional regulation that you attain, it's marvelous, because then you settle into a more stable mindfulness experience of life. So there is always that part of the dissociated aspects that needs to be addressed very specifically. Holigral is one way. There are other ways with clean language as well. I'm not sure which one would be best. You will have to explore the best therapist in these particular methods. But I can help you if you want. You can just contact me by mail and we can keep sharing ideas on this particular interest you have. And any question about my answer, Manoj? If you mute your microphone, I can hear you, if that's the case.
No, thank you so much. I got my answer. I will leave my email address here and be in contact with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And then will be Caroline. Glad to be of help. You just need to unmute your exit.
I can't unmute. Please unmute for me.
Caroline, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Thank you for unmuting me. I was struggling with that. Thank you very much, Jorge, for your presentation and for enlightening our minds. The exercise was helpful for me because I'm going through transition at work, and it has helped me to come up with so many answers to some questions that I had. Now, I wanted to compare the exercise we've had with meditation. When Grace taught us about meditation as an act to help us with mindfulness, I took it up like she requested that we can pick some of those lessons and use them on a daily basis. I have a question in that regard. How do you make sure that what you do at meditation does not just become a habit? So I was born during the war here in Uganda, and many a time that information, that the experience I went through keeps coming. But I was wondering, at the time of meditation, how can I take my thoughts away from any other and go deeper into what it could be that is disturbing my life? So if you can help me to learn how to shut out what I should not be paying attention to, and then I concentrate on that major cause of, major cause of instability or disability into my mind, I would be very grateful. Thank you very much for your knowledge share. We appreciate it.
Meditation as a life practice, it has stages, it has ups and downs. Sometimes meditation is very rich in the revelations and the inner states we can achieve, but sometimes it's very harsh and dry. It's something that it's innate to that particular approach in practice. So discipline is very important. Depending on your focus of meditation, Caroline, meditation, at least mindfulness, is just to observe what is going on in the present moment. If any thoughts may arise, my suggestion would be to explore what it is inside that particular feeling or experience. So you can ask yourself what's inside that, and like just allow that question to guide your focus of awareness in your meditation and see what happens. Because reality is created like reality within reality within reality, just like the Russian dolls. So you can be you can be dealing in the surface aspect of reality, which will bring a lot of benefits through the meditation, but there's something underneath that needs to be explored. So that question will send your focus into that particular experience, and let's explore what you can discover. Sometimes meditation brings us information or revelations about ourselves, and I would suggest that you carry on a diary for your meditations and download any experience you find throughout your practice. And let your consciousness settle down with that which you just experienced. It's a slow process. I hope it bears fruit in the short term, but we have to accept that there are certain aspects that might not be helpful through the meditation by itself. And in that regard, help is always available. So please feel free to contact me, and we can find a way just to help you deal with it is probably post-traumatic stress disorder, and that should be addressed carefully in order to have the best benefits. So I'll be happy to give you more resources in case you are interested.
Thank you so much. That is a breath of fresh air. God bless you.
I'm helpful. I'm glad I'm helpful, and I think there's no more questions.
I think SG Yera would like to unmute herself and come forward.
Okay, I'm not sure if she's unmuted, but anyway, I'm here, ready to listen. Well, seems that is that Maria Botsoglu, the participant who is interested to speak out?
Because she commented that she wasn't able to unmute herself, but now they are able to. So just would like to welcome her to voice out, if possible.
Or if just anyone who would like to ask any other questions before we wrap it up, just unmute, and I'm ready here for any doubts or input you might have. On my part, I'm more than happy to be of help. So then, I think we finished. Venkat, Arafats, my friends, all those beautiful faces and the ones I'm not looking in the screen. Thank you very much. It's very honorable for me to share this information, and I look forward to keep sharing in the internet, emails, everything. So all the best, my friends. Big hearts to you.
Very deep session, Jorge. Thank you so much.
Let's
Thank
keep
you so
enjoying
much,
and
George.
learning from the world.
Thank you so much.
Elken, nice to
A
see
very
you.
brilliant presentation,
Amanda,
and people could really benefit from it. Thank you.
thank you.
was
I
really
hope my English was understandable enough.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice
Be well, and
information.
see you in the next sessions.
Thank you, Jorge.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
We'll email you soon. Bye-bye. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.